Welcome, welcome. Thank you to all who are joining us this evening. We are pleased to have you. My name is Shahiwa Jarrett Gellin. I'm the founder and president of the Broward Black Chamber of Commerce, and we are pleased to present to you this fall our Back to School, no, business series. It's a time when you take the kids back to school, but you know what? In the fall, it's time for us small business owners to kind of get back to business and get back in the groove of things. And sometimes that means revisiting some of the fundamentals to make sure that our back house and administrative part of our business is running well. Sometimes it means that we may need to explore getting insurance and making sure that we have those succession plans for our businesses. And that is what our Back to Business series will cover. Important topics that sometimes you just don't have time to dig into, but you need to be with us through this series, this three-part series, to dig into those topics. And today we have our first installment in the series. We are extremely happy to have two of our members who are very experienced and experts in this area, have clients in this area of small business corporate practice, and they're here to share their expertise with you all tonight. It's our Back to Business series, Ask a Lawyer, right? Business basics. So get ready to get some of those fundamentals under your belt tonight and be prepared to ask those questions that you always wanted to ask a lawyer. I'm going to introduce our panel tonight without further ado. Our first up is NIKEISHA PRYOR Esquire. Hello.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Welcome, welcome. I'm happy to have you.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. We're also going to introduce GARRY LOUIMA Esquire. Welcome to the show.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for having us.
No problem. I think at the chamber, we realize that our members are not only business owners, but you're experts in your own right. And we want to make sure that we're showcasing you and your knowledge and experience so that the community, the business community, understands that we have these experts right here in the chamber. There's no need to go looking anywhere else. So I'm excited about tonight's presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you all, and then I'll come back in to see if we have any questions from our viewers. All right?
Perfect.
So without further ado, I'm going to click our stream. And you all just let me know when you want to move on to the next slide or next topic.
Sounds good.
All righty.
All right, Mr. LOUIMA.
All right, so welcome everybody to Back to Business. My name is Gary LOUIMA, and I'm joined with NIKEISHA PRYOR. Go ahead and.
Good evening, everyone. I am NIKEISHA PRYOR. I am the owner and founder of the PRYOR Law Group, as well as Cornerstone Florida Title, which is a full-service title company located in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. So I've been practicing law for about 8-9 years. I earned my JD from the university, from Nova Southeastern University College of Law, where I also got my undergraduate degree. I am admitted to practice in the states of Florida and Georgia. And as the slide says, I'm involved in several of our local voluntary bar associations. I've served on the board of the Caribbean Bar Association, of the Broward County Young Lawyers section. I'm a member of the TJ Reddick Bar Association, as well as the Gwynnis Cherry Black Women Lawyers Association. So my practice involves primarily real estate and business law. And so, I've practiced for several years in some mid-sized and large law firms, and then decided to branch out on my own about 2.5 years ago. So excited to be here with you this evening to share what we've put together, as well as to answer any questions.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Gary B. LOUIMA Esquire. I'm the owner and founder of First Step Legal Solutions. I got my JD from Florida Agricultural Mechanical University, FAMU, go Rattlers. And I'm admitted to practice in Florida. And as the slide says, I am involved in several voluntary bar associations, such as the Florida Florida Bar Business Law section. I'm also a fellow of that section as well. I'm involved with the Haitian Lawyers Association, as well as the Caribbean Bar Association and Broward County Bar Association. And as far as a community organization, I'm a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Attorney Incorporated and the Broward County Black Chamber of Commerce. Just a short disclaimer. So we are attorneys. We are going to be discussing some legal matters. Just as a disclaimer, the information provided on this presentation does not and is not intended to constitute as legal advice. Instead, all information, content, and materials are for general informational purpose only. Viewers should contact an attorney to obtain advice with respect to any particular legal matter. No viewer of this presentation should act or refrain from acting on the basis of information from this presentation without first seeking legal advice from counsel in the relevant jurisdiction.
All right, so this evening, guys, we are going to be discussing some of the basic legal considerations that folks should be mindful of when deciding to open a small business. We're going to start by going through some of the most common legal structures. So first, addressing how you want to structure your business. There are several options available to you, and we'll be discussing those. And then we'll also go into some additional legal considerations. So Gary will start off with the first legal structure that we're going to discuss.
All right, sole proprietorships. As I tell a lot of my clients, death to sole proprietorships. I do not recommend them. They're not fun. Don't do it. But there are some pros and cons of sole proprietorships. For the most part, I recommend not to do them. But the pros, they're easy to set up and low cost. With a sole proprietorship, you can just start your business. You don't have to file anything. You can just really start conducting business. You don't have any corporate tax returns. So the money that you receive, you just filed it on what we call a 1040, right? You control all the money made by the business. So as you make money, you can deposit it, you can save it, reinvest it, do whatever you want. You have a lot more freedom with the money. You have a lot more control over your business because you're the only person in charge of that business. Nobody can tell you what to do. You're the boss. Now the cons, and this is why I recommend against sole proprietorships, because the cons outweigh the pros. You have unlimited liability. So whatever your business does, you can get sued for, and your personal assets could be on the table, right? You're responsible for all the business debts and obligations. So although you might have ABC business conducted as a sole proprietorship, no matter what ABC does, you are liable for it, right? Even if it's not pertaining to you personally, because you're a sole proprietor. It's difficult to raise operating capital or long-term financing. So when you go to banks, when you look into venture capitalists, other investors, things of that nature, looking for loans, people are going to be less willing to loan to you because of the amount of control that you have over your business as a sole proprietor. So that money is going directly to you, as opposed to going to a business entity where they can track things. Is a lot less muddy up when it comes to accounting, right? And you also are available to what we call a self-employment tax of 15.3%, and there's ways to mitigate that. So as a sole proprietorship, it's easy to just start up and go, but the consequences of it if something goes awry are just way too high. And in my opinion, they outweigh the cons as opposed to the pros.
All right, so the next business structure that we're going to touch on is that of limited liability companies. So this in recent years has been a very popular business structure. A lot of people talk about forming that LLC. So what does a limited liability company mean? Limited liability company is exactly what it says. Your liability is limited. Now, as Gary mentioned in the prior slide talking about sole proprietorships, your liability is pretty much unlimited if you are a sole proprietor, because you are considered to be one and the same as your business. Now, with a limited liability company, it's the opposite. They provide legal protection from being held personally responsible for the debts and obligations of the business. And no, not all entities provide a limited legal liability. So this is why the LLC is so popular. Now, limited liability is, of course, not, it's not guaranteed in all cases when you're dealing with a limited liability company. A lot of people don't know that it can actually be lost in a few ways. For most typically, if an LLC is a single member LLC, courts will look at that if there becomes an issue where the LLC is sued for monetary or other liability. If the LLC is sued, if it's a single member LLC, oftentimes the court will look at that as the LLC being the alter ego of the owner. So if you're the sole member of an LLC, many times things get kind of muddled and kind of obscure, so that the LLC is pretty much operating as a sole proprietorship in every way but name. So that's what we mean by where the LLC is simply the alter ego of the person who owns it. Another way your liability can be lost with a limited liability company is by commingling of funds. And so again, there's also that temptation when you're a single member LLC that there is a commingling of funds. And so these are the factors that the court will look at. Other ways the limited liability can be lost is through fraud or crime. So if you're using your LLC as a shield to commit illegal acts, courts will also look at that in deciding whether to pierce the corporate veil, right? All right, now the LLC is a popular business structure. As I've said before, it's gained popularity in recent years for a number of reasons. First is, of course, the fact that it provides limited liability to its members if it's done properly, and if the court hasn't found those factors that we just went through in order to pierce the corporate veil. And by piercing the corporate veil, we mean simply disregarding the entity and treating it as the same way the court would treat a sole proprietorship. So disregarding the entity and saying, essentially, even though you are a limited liability company, you've been acting as a sole proprietor, right? Another pro of a limited liability company is that it's easy to create, right? Anyone pretty much can go to Sunbiz, do a name search, find out if there's another entity with that name that's validly formed and in existence, and go ahead and form your LLC. Now, while it is relatively simple to create, it's always advisable to retain an attorney in order to do it properly, right? You want to make sure that you have a proper operating agreement. This is one of the factors that the courts will look at in determining whether the corporate veil should be pierced. Do you have an operating agreement that sets forth how the company will be run, how the company will be managed, who are the members, what's their percentage of ownership? So while anyone can go on Sunbiz and there are tons of services out there that offer to do it for, I've seen for as little as $150, there are more considerations that you do want to be mindful of. But be that as it may, fairly easy to incorporate. Another feature of the limited liability company, as I just touched on, you have an operating agreement if it's done properly. I've seen limited liability companies that were just formed and didn't bother to create an operating agreement, right? But you want to have an operating agreement because it addresses a lot of the things that I just mentioned. What's the percentage of ownership of each of the members? Who will make decisions? What's going to happen in the event that you have to dissolve? How is that going to be handled? What are your rules for winding down the limited liability company should there arise a disagreement between the members? Okay. Another feature of the limited liability company, you cannot eliminate the duty of good faith and fair dealing. One of the other things that you want to be mindful of in setting up your limited liability company is how is it going to be managed, okay? And we have on the slide, is it member managed versus manager managed? Now, when a limited liability is member managed, that simply means the owners are the ones that are managing the LLC. That doesn't always have to be the case. There are situations where you can hire a manager who doesn't have any ownership interest in the company to manage the LLC, right? The LLC is a disregarded entity for tax purposes. That's pretty much self-explanatory. And then we have on here the hobby loss rule, where the IRS presumes that an activity is carried on for profit if it makes a profit during at least the 3 of the last 5 tax years, including the current tax years. Okay, so if you're carrying on a business and it is profitable, you are going to be taxed, plain and simple. LLCs are audited more frequently because there are a lot of ways that, because the LLC is a limited liability company and has certain tax benefits that we're going to go through on the next slide, they are audited more frequently to ensure that they are being operated as they should be. Can we go to the next slide?
Wanted to add on to that hobby loss rule as well. So a lot of times as attorneys, people come to us and say, hey, should I start an LLC just to pay my bills? Or should I start an LLC just to put a car in it? And it's not going to happen. You know, so if you're not actually producing income over time, you will lose those deductions, the ability to deduct expenses from that LLC.
And that's a great point, Gary, because one of the things that I've seen popping up recently on social media, I don't know if you've seen this, is where folks are saying, start an LLC to buy your car. Right? So again, the IRS is going to look at whether this is an actual legitimate business that is turning a profit in the last 3 of 5 years, whether it is a legitimate business and not just being used to avoid certain tax rules, as Gary just mentioned.
Perfect. The next entity we're going to examine is the partnership. So a partnership is a relationship between 2 or more entities for a business enterprise. So entities, it could be an individual, it could be an LLC, it could be a corporation, but as long as they're both getting together, you can form a partnership. In a partnership, you cannot eliminate the duty of loyalty, right? So the duty of loyalty is what we call a fiduciary duty. You have a duty to be loyal to your business. What does that mean? You cannot directly compete with it, right? So let's say, for example, Mrs. Pryor and I were to get into a law firm and we started a partnership. I cannot take cases without telling my partner because that is direct competition. Our entire purpose is to give legal services, right? So I can actually reduce it. I can say, well, if we take on these types of cases, you can take on those types of cases outside the partnership. But I cannot eliminate the duty of loyalty, right? So it's a lot more like a marriage as opposed to the other entity structures, right? Partnership, you cannot unreasonably reduce the duty of care. Duty of care is part of the fiduciary duty. You have the duty to care for your business, so not making any decision that would intentionally harm the business. And also, a partnership agreement can modify default rules. So the default rules in any business structure, whether it be an LLC, corporation, or a partnership, Florida statute and other states as well, but in the case of Florida, it has a list of laws that will govern partnerships if you do not have a partnership agreement. As we mentioned with LLCs need operating agreements. If you do not have an operating agreement, then you automatically go to the default state rules on how your LLC is going to be operated. So it's very advantageous to have your own governing document, your operating agreement or your partnership agreement, so that way you can dictate how your partnership is going to be ran and how things are going to be done within your partnership, as opposed to the state telling you what to do. Next slide. All right. And in a partnership, there are 4 different types of partnerships. So bear with me. Don't get lost now. We're going to take it slow. So we have general partnerships. We have limited liability partnerships, right? Then we have limited partnerships. And here's the confusing one, the limited liability limited partnership. And we're going to walk through all of those. So a general partnership, you do not need to be registered with the state. So if you have a partnership and you both want to sell laptops, sell houses, whatever the case may be, you do not need to tell the state that you're doing that, right? But when you file taxes, you can file it through partnership taxes, right? However, in a general partnership, partners are jointly and severally liable. There goes that L word again, liable. So what does that mean? So partners jointly, so the partnership itself would jointly be liable for any debts or obligations through contract or loans, things of that nature. And individually, each partner is going to be liable for those things as well, right? So how do we get out of that? How do we get limited liability protection? Well, there's a step you can take. So you can actually register with the state and register to be a limited liability partnership. So you actually receive that limited liability we're just talking about and still be able to operate, right? Now, a limited partnership is when you have at least one general partner and then you have at least one limited partner. So I already discussed what a general partner does, but now a limited partner, they're usually not involved in the management of the business. A lot of times we call these angel investors, right? They give you the money. I'm a partner, but you handle it. You manage it. And that limited partner receives protection as well because they're not involved in the management and ongoings of the partnership. So they may not be sued for or held liable, for a variety of things as well. Now, with that limited partnership, you can also have a limited liability limited partnership. What that would do is cover those general partners in order to give them protection as well, as opposed to just the limited partners receiving that extra barrier of protection. All right. And as far as partnership tax, partnerships are flow through entities. So the profits and losses are calculated within the partnership, right? As I said, let's say we have a partnership of 3 people. They have a business, they're selling cars or whatever the case may be, and they have income coming in, profits. So they'll do the profits and loss statements and everything of that nature, do the deductions, do the partnership tax, or whatever it is, whether it be a loss or a gain or a profits from that business on their taxes is going to then flow through the ownership interests of those 3 partners. So they split it 1/3, 1/3, and 1/3. They'll take 1/3 of the losses, or they'll take 1/3 of the profits on their own individual tax returns, right? So based on those rules, common industries with partnerships, you're going to see in real estate, law firms, accounting firms, investment firms, nightclubs/entertainment, right? Why? Because you have that extra layer of not being able to necessarily compete against your partner or your partnership. So that actually binds people closer in. So that way you have a much stricter structure depending on the type of business that you want. So you can help keep your partners liable or accountable, to say the least.
All right. So the next type of business entity that we're going to look at is corporations. Now, a corporation, as the slide says, can include nonprofit corporations. These are similar to limited liability companies in that they must file with the state, right? So in order to operate as a corporation, you have to register with the Florida Division of Corporations, which is done through SunBiz. Now, similar to your LLC, and I keep making these comparisons for a reason that I'm going to touch on, but there are a lot of similarities between your corporation and your LLC. A corporation should have bylaws that govern the operations of the corporation, similar to LLCs. Now, this point is important because a lot of people mistakenly believe that an LLC automatically provides more protection than a corporation. And that's not always the case for the reasons I mentioned earlier, where the LLC, the entity, can be disregarded, the corporate veil can be pierced if there are certain factors that we touched on, such as if you're a single member LLC and you're just using your company as your alter ego, or if there has been some fraud or crime or similar circumstance. The corporation, as the next point says, gives the most separation of the person from the business, right? Corporations comprise of 3 parts: shareholders, corporate officers, and a board of directors. And so in terms of liability protection, corporations actually do provide a very good protection against liability, which is, I don't know why this trend has popped up lately. And I think probably because of the name, that limited liability companies automatically provide more protection. But again, that's not always the case. Let's look at the next slide. All right. So let's talk about the corporate, the tax structure and benefits of a corporation. Corporation can be filed in one of 2 ways. It can be an S Corp or a C Corp. Okay, so what is an S Corp? The default structure for corporations is a C Corp. So in order to be an S Corp, that's an election that you have to make with the IRS. There's a particular form that has to be filed saying that you are operating as an S Corp. The S Corp favors the LLC in many ways. Why? Because it has the pass-through taxation structure. So what does that mean? So as we touched on briefly with limited liability companies, they do offer the pass-through taxation, meaning that all profits for an LLC go directly to the members without being taxed as at the corporate level. So in other words, the profits are only taxed once automatically in an LLC. With an S Corp election, you get the same benefit while operating as a corporation. Okay. A corporation has the members of the shareholders of the corporation must be U.S. entities or citizens. That's also one point of distinction with an LLC. Your LLC shareholders do not need to be U.S. entities or citizens. They can be foreign entities. All right. Now, with the C Corp structure of a corporation, as I mentioned, this is the default tax structure. And this is one of the reasons why corporations are not popular, because they're subject to that double taxation, which is different from an LLC and different from the S Corp corporation if you make that election. So the double taxation means that the entity itself is taxed, but then once those profits are distributed to the members or shareholders, then they're also taxed again at the individual level. So again, that is one of the reasons why the corporation is not as, has declined in popularity, I should say, as a business structure. All right. With the C Corp, there's an unlimited number of shareholders, and it has tax advantages for investors and foreign investors. So with a C Corp, you can have foreign investors, which is different from the S Corp. Right. Is there anything I failed to touch on that you want to add for the corporations, Gary?
Oh no, you hit everything. You hit everything on there. So what we got here, we have a question by Mr. Barrow. It says, what type of entity would an investment group need? It would depend, depending on what type of investments that you're making. I would, for the most part, as far as investment groups, I would look into partnerships. But like I said, I would need a lot more information and facts on what types of investments that you're making, the period of investment, whether it's short-term investments versus long-term investments, because we're talking about short-term capital gains, long-term capital gains. So we got to do some tax planning. So there's a little bit more we got to look into to give you a definitive answer. But for the most part, I do like partnerships for different investment groups, and then we can create subsidiary entities from there if needed.
All right. Okay. So another consideration, we're moving on from the different legal structures. Okay. We're going into some additional considerations for folks that are trying to open business. So one of the main considerations, of course, is raising capital. How are you going to raise money to operate your business, all right, until the business becomes profitable? So as the slide says, capital is obviously the lifeblood of the business. Without money, you cannot operate your business. There are a couple of different options available for raising capital, and some of these might be easier than others depending on the corporate structure. So primarily, when you're opening a business, you're going to either look into taking loans, right? Which sometimes can be difficult if this is a new business that doesn't have established business credit. Then a lot of times banks are going to look at the credit of the individual, owners or members in order to qualify the business for a loan. So taking loans is not always easy or the preferred way of raising capital for your business. Another way of raising capital, obviously, is the investment of the owners or the shareholders. And this is typically what we see. Folks will, come up with their own money and say they're going to invest this in the business. And then once the business starts to turn a profit, they can get that money back out, pull that money back out. Another method of raising capital is exchanging equity for capital. Now, again, if you're just starting out, if it's a brand new business, you might not have any equity to exchange for capital, right? There's also asset-based financing. So it mentions there life settlements, rollover from IRA accounts. A lot of times when folks are going into their own business, and I'll speak from personal experience, that's what I did, is to took money out of an IRA or retirement account to finance the business. So those are just a few of the options that are available for raising capital for your business.
All right, so we're getting into protecting your intellectual property. This is a key component in a great deal of businesses that have intellectual property because they fail to protect it. One huge example of that, or more popularized example of that, Mr. Nick Cannon on Viacom. He had a show called Wild and Out, and he was fired from that show and attempted to go to another network and recreate that show. But he failed to realize that Viacom trademarked Wild and Out, the actual name, so he no longer owned it, and he could not pick up the show and leave. And that trademark itself is worth billions of dollars. And he failed to do that one small thing about 8 or 9 years ago, right? So even just with trademarking or protecting your inventions through patents or protecting different ideas through copyright, we're gonna work through those different things right there. So with a trademark is a sign or symbol that uses to distinguish your product or service from those of your competitors. Trademark registration gives the owner the exclusive right to use and license the trademark. You do not obtain these rights by registering your business name, company name, or domain name. Before registering a new business or company, you should conduct a trademark search to ensure that you're not infringing on existing trademarks. Right? So a lot of people think, well, I registered on some biz, ABC LLC, ABC Incorporated, so that means nobody can use it, right? Wrong. Wrong. So you want to trademark it. There are state trademarks and there's federal trademarks. You're going to focus more on federal trademarks because they can be more superior to state trademarks. So to get a federal trademark, federally registered trademark, you go to the United States Patent and Trademark Office, right? The USPTO. From there, you do a trademark search to make sure the mouse is using your mark, your logo, your design, your name, your catchphrase. And then once that's clear, you can go ahead and do a trademark application. And then from there, it takes about 7 to 11 months and you'll get a trademark registration. So somebody is using your mark, let's say you're in Florida, somebody's using it in California, you can use federal law to protect your brand, right? So trademarks protect the source of things. Because when you see those big golden arches, you know it's McDonald's. When you see that swoosh, you know it's Nike. When you see those 3 stripes, it's Adidas, right? The actual source. Where is this product or service coming from? So you do want to protect that. A lot of the times people have their own logos, very unique or unique names. Definitely want to protect that just to make sure that no one else is using it and doesn't dilute your brand and your business. Next slide. All right, patents. A lot of times people confuse trademark and patents together or different things. I want to protect them, let me patent it. That's not always the case. So a patent is a legally enforceable right for a device, substance, method, or process. For your application to be successful, your invention must be new, useful, and inventive or innovative. Not every business needs patent protection, right? So some people think I put this invention together with that invention, and you didn't create anything new, so you cannot patent it. You know what I'm saying? So with patents, you're protecting more so the functionality of things that you're creating, making, or using with that. So if you have a patent, you're protecting the function. If you have a trademark, you're protecting the source, right? And with patent attorneys, make sure that you get a real patent attorney. Patent attorneys are a different breed of attorneys. They must have a degree in a hard science, such as a chemistry, physics, engineering, computer engineering, I'll say astroscience, whatever the case may be, molecular, whatever. They do all that good stuff because they're the ones who are going to protect the chemical compounds in the medicine. They're the ones who are going to protect the engineering structure of this new device or the code, not the code, but the technological complexities of a iPhone or whatever the case may be. You're going to patent those things. And copyrights. Copyright protects the owner's original expression of an idea rather than the underlying idea itself. In the case of startups, copyright may extend to website content, layout, software source code. For an idea to receive copyright protection, it must be original, recorded in material form. So trademarks, you're protecting the source. Patents, you're protecting the function. Copyright, you're protecting the work on a medium, right? So for a book, you're protecting the words on the medium of pages. For a piece of art, protecting the paint on a canvas. For film, people acting on film. For music, voice on a MP3 file or a CD, right? So these are things you use for copyright. Those are the three main areas of intellectual property. And if your business has something that should be protected, you should protect it because you can create another source of income. For example, if you write a book or have a movie, you can license it, right? You can give other people permission to use your work or pieces of your work and receive money from it passively. Right? And the fourth, and it's less common, but fourth is trade secrets. And we do that by creating confidentiality and non-disclosure agreements. So you might hear NDA, right? So with a trade secret, this is what we call proprietary information, right? And I'm gonna give you a few examples on how to distinguish the four that we went over. But with these agreements, various parties might need to have access to confidential business information. These could include banks or other partners for business, financing, contractors, suppliers. You can also protect your IP or intellectual property by having employees and contractors sign a confidentiality agreement that states they will not use or disclose your IP to anyone during or and after their appointment with you. For example, a trade secret, McDonald's secret sauce, is a trade secret for decades, right? You can trademark the name in itself, right? You can't copyright the recipe, and it's a sauce. You can't patent a sauce. It's food, right? So it's a trade secret. Nobody else does it. Burger King doesn't have that secret sauce. Wendy's doesn't have it, or whatever restaurant does not have it as well. So you're protected via contract, right? So if you have a way that you market that's really new to most people, or most people don't do, if you have a way that you generate business, if you have a way that you conduct business, if you have a particular way on how you move your products from Europe to Africa to Miami, or from Mexico to Canada, wherever the case may be. If you have a new proprietary information about new processes or a new thing that you have that most people do not have necessary access to, you want to protect those things. Another large example of that is Amazon. A lot of people have different ideas to sell to Amazon because Amazon has all the capital, right? They don't have the capital for their ideas. They go into these meetings with Jeff Bezos' lawyers and everything of that nature, and they neglect to sign an NDA. And then 2 months later, they see their invention being marketed all over national TV, right? But you got to protect yourself with your IP.
All right, guys. Next consideration in starting or running a business is obtaining the necessary requisite licenses in order to legally operate your business. So there might be several types of licenses or permits that your business will need, depending on where the business will be located, as well as depending on the nature of the business. What are the types of goods, products, services that you're going to be offering, right? Now, the number and types of licenses that you will require will depend, like I just said, on the nature of the business and the service being offered. And so there's no way to kind of give a blanket list of licenses that you're going to need for every type of business. The best way to figure that out is really to contact the local government agencies where you're going to operate your business. So not only the municipality, but the county, you might require separate licenses, and there might be certain state and even federally required licenses depending on the product or service you're offering. At the very minimum, you need to contact the municipality of where you're going to be operating and apply for a business tax receipt as well as a sales tax receipt. So that's the very minimum. And then oftentimes your local municipality will tell you you need these additional licenses, or you can contact an attorney who will do the research for you, make sure that you're in compliance with getting the proper licenses and permits that are needed to operate your business without incurring fines and penalties from your municipality or from the state, right? Go ahead, Gary.
Oh, insurances. I'm sorry. Insurance. Most business zones require all businesses that employ a number of workers to get employer liability insurance. But aside from being a legal requirement, adequate insurance coverage protects the business against compensation claims from employees and visitors. Public liability or professional indemnity insurance are also recommended. Make sure you protect your business, right? So if you're starting off, you may not have the most capital in the world, but what you don't want to do, and I've seen this happen several times, you go into a situation where you have some liability, you don't have any insurance, now your business is at risk from going out of business, right? So that insurance will definitely cover you. So if something does happen, some incident does happen, you are covered. Whether it's a restaurant covering like premises liability, or even workers getting burned, things of that nature. Or even if you're providing professional services, make sure you get malpractice insurance to fully protect yourself. Or especially insurance on vehicles as well. I see that a lot. You have a lot of businesses have commercial vehicles, whether it be delivery or just to have on hand. Going from client to client, make sure you get insurance on those vehicles and ensuring that your employees who are using those cars will be covered in the event of an accident.
All right. Another consideration for businesses is making sure that you have in place employee or independent contractor agreements. Okay. Now, employees are covered by national and state-based legislation, and they're entitled to certain minimum things by law. Okay. Of course, minimum wages, sick leave, depending on the size of the business, you might be mandated to provide paid sick leave, paid maternity leave, paid vacation. So these are things that you want to set forth in your agreement with your either employee or an independent contractor. A lot of folks are under the mistaken assumption that with an independent contractor or a 1099, I've heard people say a 1099 employee, which is kind of a contradiction, because if it's a 1099, they're not an employee, right? And so you want to make sure that you set forth these things in your agreement with either the employee or the independent contractor. Independent contractors are considered, like I said, not employees. They are running their own business. And so one of the considerations that you also want to be mindful of is that you're not paying someone as an independent contractor, but that they're really acting as an employee. And that is something that a lot of business owners do in order to minimize their taxes, is they'll have employees, but they're paying them as 1099 independent contractors. And there are certain specific rules that govern that, right? So for an independent contractor, you're not dictating the manner in which they do the work, right? Whereas for an employee, you have direct control. You're dictating when, how, and the manner in which they do the work. So there are certain distinctions that will be looked at in determining if you're improperly hiring, treating an employee as an independent contractor, or vice versa. For independent contractors, you're not required to pay their taxes or their insurance, because again, these are independent entities that are running their own businesses. So they're responsible for paying their own taxes. And so as the next point says, you need to correctly assess whether the worker is an employee or independent contractor. This will determine, their entitlements under the law. An independent contractor is not entitled to paid sick leave or paid annual leave. But again, if you're muddling that or improperly classifying those employees, it could raise certain legal and financial implications. All right. So you want to make sure you're classifying your workers correctly, that the relationship is documented. And the best way to do that is through either an employee agreement or an independent contractor agreement. All right. I think that brings us to the end of the presentation. I don't know if we still have anyone left with us or if we've bored you all to death. It's been about 45 minutes.
That's funny. Hey, with lawyers, we tend to give a lot of good information, but definitely
we like to hear ourselves talk.
I admit that is true. I admit it's true. I can't even lie. We did have a follow-up with Troy saying that it was a long-term, I guess, capital gains play that he was thinking about. And just to kind of elaborate on that, we actually do on Tuesday, the chamber, we have kind of sent out a little email for people who are thinking about investing in properties and, maybe, forming an investment group. We're just kind of exploring that. And Troy's one of those individuals. So I get where his question is coming from. We have a lot of members that are operating Airbnbs. We have a member who's actually buying a hotel down in the Caribbean, and so I guess that's where that question came from. If you're going to form an investment group, what's the best legal structure to have? I know you're not providing advice; it's just guidance. Every situation is different, but that's what he was kind of getting at, I guess.
As far as that type of investment, your best move is to set a consultation with myself or or Mrs. Pryor,
Exactly.
and so that we can go through the details of your investment group and your plan and your goals, and do some tax planning and see what's the best tax and legal structure for your investment group.
I love that you both kind of intertwined the legal considerations in with the tax considerations. And I kind of want you to just speak a little bit more to the importance of that, because we get calls at the chamber all the time with people just saying, well, how do I start a business? And I just kind of want you to elaborate a little bit more on why it's not important just to think about the structure, but why the tax implications are important for people trying to start businesses, for them to consider upfront in the beginning.
I'll take that if
Yeah.
Sure. So with the tax implications, the first person who eats no matter what in your business is Uncle Sam, right? So you better not hide money from him. In the day. And if you are making profit, you are going to have to pay him. So depending on what type of tax structure you have, we can find ways to minimize how much you're paying him, right? So for example, a lot of people did LLCs. Let's say, for example, you made $100,000 for your LLC. You can get taxed at a rate of 15.3%. That's $15,300. Just because you made $100,000 doesn't mean that you have $100,000.
Right.
You might have different expenses. Things might happen. You buy things X, Y, and Z. So now at the end of the year, you get this bill for $15,000. You're like, what do I do? So a lot of times people try to underreport. But when you underreport, what do you want to do? What are you going to do when you buy a house and you have to show your income? When you want to buy equipment for your business, when you want to go into business with other businesses. For example, I represent my clients. If we're doing business with another business, I may want to see financial statements. I may want to see tax documents to verify their income to make sure it's a good move. But if you can't show me that because you're trying to underreport, I can't go off your word. End of the day. So by doing some tax planning, getting in the proper tax structures, you can minimize your tax liability, which will help you save money over time, which could be hundreds of thousands, not millions of dollars over time. And you can really play the tax game to your advantage from there.
And if I could just add to that a couple of things, not only if you're underreporting, then one of the issues that you're going to run into is not being able to raise capital when you need it, right? That's number one. But I also want to emphasize, guys, that we are attorneys, not accountants. I'm an attorney, but I'm also a business owner, and I work very closely with my CPA, right? I'm constantly in communication with my CPAs throughout the year. So our advice can never be replaced or substituted for a CPA. So whenever you are getting ready to open a business, we can give you some basic information on why a particular structure might be more preferable or advisable generally. And, if you're trying to avoid liability, or if you're going to be a sole proprietor or a single member LLC, why certain structures might be more beneficial. But ultimately, I'm always going to tell you to consult with a CPA to determine what your tax goals are, and the CPA ultimately is going to give you the best advice as to if your goals are X, then probably the best business structure. I can tell you legally what business structure is advisable, but the CPA is going to tell you, well, if these are your long-term or short-term goals, then this is the business structure you should go with.
Exactly.
And so ultimately, they go hand in hand, and our advice cannot replace the advice of a CPA where that's concerned.
Yeah, and I like that point, NIKEISHA, because you both, brought up in the presentation. It's important to realize that you do need a team to guide you when you start a business, and that's what we try to continually repeat. You do need a lawyer to because you want to get it right in the beginning. You don't want to have to on the back end try to fix it as your business is puttering along. So you need that lawyer as well as that CPA to give you the good advice. And obviously we saw the ramifications of some of what Gary was talking about, the underreporting, etc., when people went to, go get the PPP and other things. So it's important to be honest about what's happening in your business, because there can be very dire consequences for that. And perhaps your business won't survive because you couldn't get the proper amount of PPP funding or what have you, because you're underreporting. I do have I see a question. I can't pop it out here, but what is your typical client, or what is a typical question you get when people contact you for advice with regard to starting a business? Go ahead, NIKEISHA. I'll start with you, and then Gary can end out.
That's a tough one. I don't know that I have a typical question, because there are so many different types of businesses that I deal with. Maybe the most typical question is, what does it cost? Or, I see a service out here that's charging me $200 to incorporate. Why should I come to you and not go to them? That's a very typical question. And I touched on that. It's anyone can, you don't need an attorney to go on Sunbiz and file your LLC. But that's only a very small part of it. There are a lot of additional considerations. What's going to happen when you get into a dispute with your partner and there are only two of you? Who breaks the tie? Or, if you decide to part ways, is the business going to wind down, or close? So these are things that, you don't get the benefit of if you just go to Sunbiz or go to one of these companies that want to charge you $150 or $200 to file your LLC. So that's, if I would say a typical question, a lot of the questions vary depending on the nature of the business. But if I could say across the board, one common question is, why do you charge, $1,500, for example, to prepare to form my LLC? And it's because there's a lot more that goes into it than just going on Sunbiz and clicking a few boxes.
Right. That is very true. Go ahead, Gary.
A common question is really what happens between me and my partner. So a lot of times people start businesses with their family member, with their mate, their friend, their significant other, so on and so forth. And I've been in the lawsuits, brother suing brother, mother suing child, and you name it, I've seen it. So the biggest thing is the most frequently asked question is, what do I do with my partner as far as how we're going to operate if we have a disagreement, things of that nature. That's when those governing documents come in. So if you have a partnership, you can have a partnership agreement. LLCs going to have operating agreements. Corporations are going to have these bylaws, right? And within those, we can concoct a few clauses specific to your situation to make sure that you're protected. You might have one partner or shareholder or LLC member who's contributing a lot more money, right? But the other person is contributing the ideas, right? How do we value that, and how do we protect ourselves when we're getting out? Like, well, I gave you all the money, but I had the idea, so what do we document? What do we agree on the value of this idea to be, right? So in those governing documents, you want to put into there what are the initial contributions from each person, as well as when we have disputes, sometimes there's only two people in there, 50-50, and if we disagree, what happens next, right? So we call those deadlock provisions we could put in there to so that we can find an alternative when you have disputes between the two people, and things along those lines, just to preserve the relationship before the business relationship as well.
Right. And guys, doing it the proper way up front, it might cost you a little bit more, but it saves you so much more in the long run. Because if these provisions aren't outlined and you guys are deadlocked and can't come to an agreement, then now you're going to have to sue each other, right? Which is going to cost way more than the couple $100 it would cost you to get it done properly up front.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I was gonna make that point. I look at the legal profession, especially in this context, as when we're, a small business owner seeks the advice up front because you want to, look at things in a preventative nature. How can
Right.
I best set things up so that, I avoid pitfalls. I have everything outlined if an issue comes up. It's kind of preventative so that no matter what comes up, we kind of have a clause for that. We have a resolution for that. And I can kind of just go about running my business because all of that is taken care of and properly documented. I do want our viewers to know, just get an idea of what types of firms you have advised before we close out tonight, just so they get an idea of the depth and breadth of your experience, and they can go, kind of walk away saying, "Oh, okay, I kind of have that business. Maybe I'll give a call. I have a few questions, set up my consultation, like Gary threw out there, and see, what advice I may have." So go ahead, NIKEISHA, and kind of just give us an idea of the different types of businesses that you've advised.
So I have represented and advised restaurants, food trucks. I had a client that owned a hair care line. So this client developed their own hair care line from scratch. So there are a lot of agreements that went into that. As you can imagine, if these are proprietary formulas, so we're having non-disclosure agreement, a lot of the intellectual property agreements that Gary covered, registering their trademarks, their copyrights, things of that nature. We've also had real estate investment firms. So quite a range.
Nice.
Yeah, quite a range. Yeah.
Nice. What about you, Gary?
A range as well. Restaurants, at a food truck that fortuitously enough, NFL players stopped by and ate at the food truck, and then you want to invest into the food truck.
Oh, cool.
And franchise nationally. So we're working on that. Investment firms, real estate firms, grocery stores, car dealerships. I have some entertainment, so some record labels, as well as a producer. He's signed to a major label. Can't disclose his name at this time. And top of the head, what else? I have a few people who have their own inventions per se, and they're just helping them getting through the manufacturing stage. Those investors, venture capitalists are speaking to them, getting those agreements set in place, so that way they can set up their company and still profit from their invention where they don't have that type of capital.
Lovely. Well, I certainly enjoyed our time together. I think both of you shared some very valuable information that, quite frankly, at the chamber, we get these calls about structure and tax implications, etc. How do I, set up my company? What is the difference between an LLC, S corp, etc.? What does all this mean? So I think you all did a very, very good job, and I thank you for your time tonight and your presentation. And I'm sure our audience thanks you as well. So thanks again. And
thank you so much for having us.
No problem. Thank you, NIKEISHA. Thank you, Gary.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Once again, thank you all for joining us tonight. We know that our presenters, NIKEISHA Pryor, Esquire, and Gary LOUIMA, Esquire, provided you with invaluable information. Now, this is just the start, okay? This was basics, kind of business basics with regard to legal considerations and tax considerations. Now, if you're thinking of starting a business, you really should consult with an attorney as well as an accountant. We can't stress to you the importance of making sure you get things right from the very beginning. As NIKEISHA mentioned earlier, you may pay a little bit up front, but if you don't do it right, you can pay a lot in the end, right? Through litigation or when things go wrong, and you don't have the things in place that you should have from the very beginning. So once again, thank you for joining us for our first installation in our Back to Business series this fall. We will be following up with a second session soon. So please make sure you check us out on our Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, as well as TikTok. We're on TikTok. So that you can keep up with the chamber and its happenings. Thank you for joining us and have a wonderful night.